Now, when I first saw this, I wasn't really sure about how I felt about the idea of creativity in this. Just as I wasn't really first sure how I felt about that composer is dead piece. I started thinking, okay, is that really that creative? And the more I thought about it, I don't know if it fits the traditional sense of creativity, but really, and I'm not saying they're of the same quality by any means, but in many ways it's not that different than what T.S. Eliot did when he was writing The Wasteland, where he took different lines, images, and things from mythology and pieced them together. Another example. Luckily, this didn't happen here, because it would have been really interesting for us to deal with. A student was assigned a research paper. This will show you just how drastically the world of research can change. He had his topic, and he was creative. He went to Wikipedia, didn't do what you're thinking. He took his topic and created a stub on Wikipedia. That's when you put it in as an entry that hadn't been populated before. And he allowed other people to go in and populate it for him. Okay? He attributed his sources. It was creative, it was innovative. So there are lines that are getting twisted, warped, shaped, broken, and we have to figure out what all of these implications are and how we're going to deal with them. Part of why this is happening is because the World Wide Web has become what Tapscott calls the world's biggest coffee house. And it's a coffee house where anybody can play. And this is something that Clay Shirley from NYU has studied extensively. Now here he talks about the size and the expressive capability. But there's a couple other interesting things here that I want to talk about. I want to tell you a really fascinating story about this. Last spring, I received an email from the woman at our help desk. And the email had originally gone to Michael Maines, who's the chairman of our fine arts department. Okay? And it eventually made its way to me saying, do you know anything about this? The email had been sent to Michael Maines from a university professor in China, wanting to know about our program in something. Now, we had no idea how she found Michael Maines, let alone how she found out about our program. And so I said, no, I don't know anything about it. So we emailed her back, said, sorry, we can't help you. She emailed us again and said, well, I'm really sorry, thank you for trying. And she put a little bit more information in her next email. We got that, and then we involved Mr. Bigenhoe here, and he put a couple items into Google. And he struck what's called a Google. A Google is when you put things in there and you only get back one item. Okay? How often does that happen? Okay? He got a Google, and we figured out what she was referring to. She was referring to an educational journal that had been published in Thailand. There was a citation in that educational journal referring to a website that students in my Nature and Uses class had created in 2001. And she had found it and used it, and it went through this chain. Now, part of the lesson there is you don't always know who the collaborator is, but it also points to that talent will rise to the top in this world. In an example that has much bigger implications for all of us, the Human Genome Project. When that first started, it was occurring in multiple laboratories, and none of them were making the progress that they wanted. It was only when they collaborated via the internet and decided to break up the job and focus their talents on each part that they understood the best that they made the progress and finished it years ahead of schedule, and then could get on with the really important research of actually using what they had mapped. Where a lot of this sort of collaboration takes place and also may have implications for your children's future, is in something called an ideagora, okay, from the Greek agora, if you remember those from when you studied mythology and things, a central gathering point. The most famous one of these is a place called innocentive. What happens at these sites is companies post problems that they have, and then people try to solve the problems. And what will usually happen is an individual will somehow get a hold of somebody from somewhere else who has a particular talent that's needed, and people from all over will pool their resources just for this project. And they compete to see who's going to win the payoff for coming up with the solution. Now, these are not just little piddling companies that are putting stuff on here. 3 of the main companies on this site are DuPont, Procter & Gamble, and Boeing. And Procter & Gamble, I'm sorry? It's called Innocentive. And Procter & Gamble, which notoriously was a very closed company, now says that 35% of their innovation comes through this. Okay? So in a sense, it's outsourced through this. It becomes temporary jobs for people in a way. The defining talent here is you have to recognize other talents from diverse sources and be able to pull them together and collaborate to reach your solution. Sounds just like those mega regions that I was talking about. Ben Schneiderman, who's a researcher at the University of Maryland, says that this also has implications for the scientific method. Schneiderman says the real key to finding scientific solutions to really big problems, disaster relief, healthcare, energy sustainability, is going to depend on studying human interactions more than it's going to depend on anything else. Now, what about careers in this world? Even if you stay in the same general career, Tom Peters says that your job will have a life expectancy of 10 to 14 years, if you're lucky. If you're lucky. United States Department of Labor says that people our children's age, by the time they're 38, will have between 10 and 15 different jobs. Pink says a lot of this is because so many things can be replaced by a $200 processor now. In a recent compilation of surveys from different employers, 97% of the employers said creativity has become of the utmost importance in their hiring. 63% of them say that they would hire the creative person before they would hire the technically skilled person. And 85% of them said they can't find what they need.